Good evening, everyone. As I address the nation today, let me start off with 2 words. Fantasy football leagues. Let me repeat that. Fantasy football leagues. America was founded on the fantasy of freedom and liberty. So it's no surprise to me that fantasy football leagues are taking America by storm. No, I'm serious. I'm not kidding. As a fantasy football league participant myself, there's one fantasy football league that has captured my attention and interest more than any other. Pause for dramatic effect. It is the Armchair Quarterback League, and it's undeniably the ultimate fantasy football league and the envy of all fantasy leaguers. The man who introduced me to fantasy football is my good friend, Vince Lombardi. Vince, can you go ahead and stand up? Well, I guess Vince must have stepped out. But if Vince was in here now and stood up, I'm sure he would have something to say to all of us, and especially about the Armchair Quarterback League, or AQL. In this moment, we have to confront lies with truth. The very future of the Armchair Quarterback League depends on it. My fellow fantasy leaguers, we're facing a defining moment, an inflection point. We must, with one overwhelming voice, speak as a unified league and say there's no place for fantasy league intimidation or fantasy league violence. Whether it's directed at the Armchair Quarterback League or FanDuel, Yahoo Sports, UnderDog Fantasy, or any other fantasy league, there is no place for it, period. No place ever. I speak today near Capitol Hill, almost 2,800 miles from the office of the AQL Commission, the citadel of fantasy football league excellence. I know there's a lot at stake in the 2020 Armchair Quarterback League season. The honor of being crowned the AQL champion. The prize, the Robert E Abbott Armchair Quarterback League trophy. The ultimate fantasy football league award. But you will all have your differences in what games you pick week to week. You'll have your differences of opinions. And that's how it's supposed to be. So today, I appeal to all AQs, regardless of your entry name, to meet this moment of fantasy league importance. You must make your individual picks knowing what's at stake. And not just the games for this upcoming weekend, but for the AQL season that has held you together as you have sought for the AQL championship trophy that is at stake. You must make your picks knowing who you are, where you have been, and what you're at risk of winning or losing. Look, my fellow fantasy leaguers, the old expression, fantasy game wins don't come free, has never been more true than after week 14 going into week 15 of the 2022 AQL season. No, I'm serious. I'm not joking. Game wins requires constant vigilance. From the very beginning of the 2022 AQL season, nothing has been guaranteed about the Robert E Abbott Armchair Quarterback League trophy. Every AQ champion has had to fight for it, defend it, protect it, preserve it. For that's what the Armchair Quarterback League is. It's a choice, a decision of the AQs, by the AQs, and for the AQs. The issue couldn't be clearer. In my view, and it has been perfectly presented by sole proprietor, the AQL Player of the Week, who scored a high of 10 game winners in week 14. We, the fantasy leaguers, must decide whether we will have fair and free game picks and that every pick counts. We, the fantasy leaguers, must decide whether we're going to sustain a league where reality is accepted, the rules are obeyed, and your weekly picks are truly sacred. As your president, I so declare with the authority as your commander-in-chief, the aforementioned AQ sole proprietor is, in fact, week 14's player of the week. The great irony about week 14 is that it generated one of the greatest attacks, overcomes, and overturns in the 2022 AQL season. Sole proprietor, who was 3 games out of first place, came in like a tsunami with his 10-game winners. Now, while sole proprietor's 10-game winners may be the most attacked game results in the present AQL season, there's no weekly game picks in the history of the AQL that we can be more certain of its results. Every legal challenge that could have been brought was brought. Every recount that could have been undertaken was undertaken. Every recount confirmed the results. Whatever facts or evidence had been demanded, the big lie has been proven to be just that. A big lie. Every single time. Therefore, with confidence, I can declare that sole proprietor is Week 14's AQL Player of the Week. The pronouncement of this fact twice confirms with assurance that the game picks of sole proprietor, the AQL Player of the Week, are indisputable. We, the fantasy leaguers, must decide whether the rules of the fantasy league will prevail or whether we will allow the dark forces and thirst for power to be put ahead of the standards, rules, and deciders that have long guided us. In Week 14, you well know the AQL was under attack, stormed by 4 antagonizers, attempting to disrupt and possibly overturn the long-established, acknowledged, and respected rule of weekly game picks in the AQL. These 3 AQs refused to make their picks in Week 14 of the 2022 season. Naptown Niner, Bad Mamby Johamby, and Thrill of Victory, the 1998 and 1999 AQL champion and legend. All 3 of these AQs were penalized for the infraction of failing to make their Thursday night picks. Come on, men! Even more egregious was Trophy Lineman, the 1990 and 2018 AQL champion and legend, who failed to make all his Week 14 picks. What makes Trophy Lineman's pick so conspicuously offensive is that this was his 2nd week in a row to miss all his picks. The penalty for this infraction is for him to be removed from the 2022 AQL roster. Execution of this disciplinary action has been acted on with swift and severe justice. If Trophy Lineman refuses to accept the penalty for missing all his picks 2 weeks in a row, if he refuses to accept his expulsion from the AQL roster, then Trophy Lineman is abusing his power and putting his loyalty to himself before the loyalty to the AQL. That would be a MAGA mistake. I want to be very clear. This is not about me. It's about all of us. It's about what makes fantasy football leagues fantasy football leagues. It's about the durability of our fantasy leagues. For fantasy football leagues are more than a form of weekend entertainment. No, they're a way of being, a way of seeing the world, a way that defines who we are, what we believe, and why we do what we do. And picking game winners is simply the fundamental formula for being top ranked. And now, our attention turns to the top ranked AQs in the 2022 Armchair Quarterback League season. We must, in this moment, dig deep within ourselves and recognize that we can't take Pillaging for playoffs for granted any longer. With the Robert E Abbott Armchair Quarterback League trophy on the line, we have to remember that after Week 14, Pillaging for playoffs stands in 4th place with 127 game winners. His standing is not a matter of democracy, the rule of people, nor a monarchy, rule of one, nor the moneyed, rule of the affluent. Instead, Pillaging for playoffs standing is based on the rule of mathematics. Game additions, the total, the sum, amount of game winners for each week of the 14 weeks of the 2022 Armchair Quarterback League season. To state the obvious, the lives of 21 of the remaining AQs of the 22 Armchair Quarterback League, from the antiquity of Week 1 to the pre-game choices of Week 15, have been shaped by the battle between these competing forces. Between the aspirations of AQ champions, rookies, and gridiron veterans, and between analyzing game stats and player profiles versus team colors, mascots, and best-looking cheerleaders. That being addressed with his 127 game winners, Pillaging for playoffs is only 3 games out of first place with 4 weeks left in the 2022 AQL season. Next, what we're doing now is going to determine whether Big Chief, the 2021 and present Armchair Quarterback League champion, and impending doom will long endure their position of 3rd place. Think about it. Think about what you're thinking about when you're thinking. In my view, the biggest of questions is whether the AQL system, the individual efforts of picking game winners, will prevail for these 2 AQs tied at 128 game winners going into week 15. This is a struggle they are now facing, a struggle for dominance, a struggle for decency and dignity, a struggle for picks and progress, a struggle for the very soul of the fantasy football league itself. Make no mistake, raw data is on the ballot for Big Chief and impending doom. They must remember that raw data leads to pure calculation of their total game picks and standings in the AQL. These 2 AQs need to start looking out for themselves again, seeing themselves as they are, as solid for 3rd place holders and as entrenched enemies. This is the choice they must make. Disunion and chaos are inevitable. There's been war before in the fantasy leagues. There's been division between fantasy leaguers, but we've never given up on the great Armchair Quarterback League experiment. And we can't do that now. The remarkable thing about the Armchair Quarterback League is the league itself. Big Chief and impending doom must choose what path they will tread, because the AQL trophy is on the ballot, and they must remember that even in desperate weeks ahead, they have 2 choices. They can play it safe and hope for a respectable 2nd, 3rd, or 4th place. Or they can throw in the fundamental values and beliefs of caution to the wind and go for it all. As the crowds cheered for me, I cheer for both of you. Let's go, Brandon. I think first we believe the pick of every single AQ in the Armchair Quarterback League is sacred, to be honored, not denied, respected, not dismissed, counted, not ignored. A game pick is not partisan tool to be counted when it helps one AQ and tossed aside when it doesn't. Second, as I said earlier, I think we must, with an overwhelming voice, stand against fantasy leaguer violence and intimidation. Period. Stand up and speak against it. Hey, you got to say hi to me. We go back a long way. She was 12 and I was 30, but at any rate, this young woman helped me get a lot done. Remember? I'll never forget. Fantasy leaguers, we don't settle our differences with a riot, a mob, or a bullet, or a hammer. We settle them peacefully with our game picks. We have to be honest with ourselves, though. We have to face this problem. We can't turn away from it. We can't pretend that our picks are going to pick themselves. I know it. I know it can be hard at times. You try your best, but it doesn't feel like enough. This has never been more true than for Lil Goat, who is now in second place with 129 game winners. There was an alarming rise in the number of game picks that Lil Goat missed in week 14. Some AQs may condone Lil Goat's poor week of picks by simply remaining silent, because silence is complicity to the disturbing rise of bad picks by Lil Goat. This pernicious tendency to ignore Lil Goat's bad picks or excuse her bad picks or explain them away only will perpetuate future poor performances by Lil Goat. Lil Goat can't allow this sentiment to grow. She must confront it head on. Now. It has to be stopped. I believe the voices excusing or calling for Lil Goat to be intimidated by the results of week 14 are a distinct minority in the AQL. But they're loud and they're determined. She must be more determined. She must reject fantasy leaguer violence and AQ intimidation. I know it isn't easy. Fantasy football is imperfect. It always has been. But Lil Goat, you're called to fight and defend your previous standing now. History and common sense tell us that Lil Goat has the opportunity to thrive, excel again in the AQL. No, seriously, I'm not kidding. At its best, the Armchair Quarterback League is a zero-sum league for AQs to succeed. Someone else has to fail for others to succeed. We believe we should leave AQs behind because each AQ is an obstacle between you and the Armchair Quarterback League championship and its trophy. No AQ knows this better than sole proprietor, who is now again in first place with 130 game winners going into week 15. Guess what? One game stands between sole proprietor and his second place adversary. That's right, only one game. Sole proprietor, you've unchained yourself. But the rest of the AQs want to put you back in chains of second, third, or fourth place. Every person registered in the AQ, every AQ is an opponent. If that's true, then every AQ is an enemy of sole proprietor. Individual domination, individual superiority, individual ruthlessness is required of sole proprietor to defend his first place position. Come on, man. Look, even as I speak here, the other 20 AQs are already casting or getting ready to cast their game picks for week 15. Some AQs will cast their game picks in the final hours just before the kickoff of week 15 of the 2022 AQL. That means that we may not know the winner of week 15 until after the week 15's Monday night football game. It takes time to count all legitimate winners and losers in a legal and orderly manner. It's always been important for AQs in the Armchair Quarterback League to be informed and engaged. Now it's important for all AQs to be patient as well. That's how this is supposed to work. As I stand here today, sole proprietor is leading the AQL by one game. But there are some AQs who won't commit, will not commit to accepting the results of the AQL standings. This is a path to chaos in the AQL. It's unprecedented. It's unsportsmanlike. It's un-AQL. I find it absolutely necessary, absolutely imperative, absolutely essential to declare sole proprietor as the forerunner, the leader, the ruler of the 2020 Armchair Quarterback League going into week 15. Too many AQs have sacrificed too much for too many weeks, too many months, too many years for us to walk away from the fantasy football ideals. In our bones, we know fantasy football is at risk. But we also know this. It's within our power, each and every one of us, to preserve the Armchair Quarterback League. And I believe we will. I think I know this league. You have the power. It's your choice. It's your decision. It's your picks. The fate of fantasy football, the fate of the soul of the Armchair Quarterback League lies where it always has, with every individual AQ in your hands, in your heart, in your picks. My fellow AQs, we'll meet this moment. You just need to remember who you are. You are the Armchair Quarterback League. There's nothing beyond your capacity if you do it by yourself. May the wind always be at your back and the sun in your opponent's eyes. And I hope to see you on the other side of week 15.